Hi, can you hear? Doesn't sound like it's on. Maybe. Hello, is it now on? Sounding good? I'm Sandy Esger, and I'm one of those people that, when they talk about the old timers at church, it's like, how did that happen? But it is, we've been here over 42 years. Out of the 60 that the church has been in operation. So that was kind of a surprise to me. I guess I hadn't really added that up. But Dan, my husband, and I've been married 49 years this summer. And he brought me here kicking and screaming. We left the bosom of our family, my family, in Illinois. We'd always grown up, by them and with them, and family was all around, and we were going to blaze new trails and come out here, but this is where the job was, at Caterpillar. Now, we got here before before they even fully built the building. So Dan worked at Big Lots. I mean, it wasn't Big Lots then, it was Caterpillar at that point, but he was helping to hire people, to work at Caterpillar all those years ago. We brought our 2-year-old daughter Amy with us. She was born in Illinois, and then we added our son Dave after we'd been here a few years. Let's see. Oh, Dan's an engineer, so when it came time to look for a church, and we were looking pretty quick after we got here, we sat down and drew up a chart in alphabetical order. And went through the phone book and picked out churches. Well, we got to Faith and we knew we'd found home. So we just wanted to be here, and so we never did make it all the way through the chart. But, oh well. So that's why we've been at Faith so long now. Probably and we've served in a bunch of different ways, but one of my favorite ways was teaching at the school and then working as the elementary principal there as well. So that was just super fun for me. And now all of a sudden we're old and we have grandkids in town. My beloved Amanda, that I always say Dave hit the jackpot when he got her, and they're 3, and then Amy and her family are out in Virginia. However, her oldest one is a freshman in college at Boyce down in Louisville, Kentucky. So she's coming here to live for the summer and is going to work at Adventure Camp. So we are one set of happy grandparents. Yeah. Well, let me pass, and I'm delighted to get to be here tonight and just asking God to use my mouth in such a way that it's a blessing to you. Here's my buddy Connie.
Hello, my name is Connie Thomas. And I too am an old timer. And we came about 34 years ago, which it doesn't seem that long. And we came to Lafayette when my husband was for his job. And when we got here, we had a 6-week-old and a 18-month-old. And I just want to tell you, they were out of control. And we were the very first members of Pastor Byer's parenting class. And so I think it's just really funny. God has a sense of humor. And, we started working really hard with our kids. And then I found out I was pregnant again. And I was like, I don't even have the first 2 under control. And I'm pregnant again, But, again, God has the pastor's wife came alongside of me and she said, Connie, one day, because of the number of children you have, people will come to you for advice. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding? And because she said, nobody wants to hear how you have perfect children, right? Because I know I didn't at the time, because my kids were far from perfect. And so I needed to know how to handle non-perfect children, right? And of course, we all know there is no perfect children, right? But I just think that is so funny. So here we are, years later. And I actually wrote her a couple of months ago and said, you will never believe what happened. And so anyway.
And I'm Lori Walters. I'm also another old timer. We've been here 39 years this summer. And we, Yellow Page 2, we opened up the book. And 3 weeks after our wedding, we showed up at Faith. And it was actually for the it was called Pig Roast at that time. What's it called now? the community
Community
picnic.
picnic.
And so I think the food one is over. So yeah. After my husband, I had already graduated from Purdue. He graduated later, and we just stuck. And a lot of it was because of faith. And so here we are. And we have 3 kids, grown, grandkids happening. They're all married, very excited. They all are in their local church, so that's a blessing. And we homeschooled all the way through, so my answers may be a little bit different because Connie homeschooled part of the time, but then they were in traditional school here at Faith. So that might flavor some of my answers too.
Did you want to tell about your kids?
I didn't tell about my kids. I have 4 kids now. So my oldest is 35, and then 34, and then 30, and then 28, which I cannot believe. But they all, our deal was if they married somebody from Faith, we'd pay for their wedding. That was my plan. But I should have said, if you marry somebody from Faith and stay here, because one's in South Carolina, one's in North Carolina, one's in Iowa, and then one is in Peru, Indiana. So I messed up.
Okay, and then I also had the opportunity to video Nikki Lambeth, who's on the screen. She was bearing with me because I wasn't very good at videoing, and so this is actually the second take because I didn't do it at first, but I didn't catch her name, but it's Nikki Lambeth. And then you guys are gonna have to bear with me because the screen's kind of wonky.
Hello, I'm Michelle St. Let me introduce myself. My husband is Jonathan Lambeth. We've been there for more than 30 years. We have 3 children, 3 boys. Luke is 28, and he's in seminary. David is 24, he's an engineer at Wabash. He and his dear wife Sadie have 1 son and another one on the way. So we're excited about a second grandson. And then our youngest, Stephen, is in law school. I'm sorry I can't be with you tonight to interact. God has chosen for my brain to react in rather large ways to the HVAC system when it comes on anywhere south of the main school hallway, so the building itself is dangerous for me. So I can't be here, so this is our second best.
All right, here's our first question, panel. How do you help your kids develop a prayer life? And we are going to hear from Nikki first on that one.
All right, well, I think the best way to teach a kid to pray is to pray. And making prayer a true priority in your own life. And to illustrate that, I want to actually tell you a story from when I was a child. My father, Paul, many here know him as Rafe Ure. He's an amazing prayer warrior, has been since he was saved when I was 5. And I remember catching him praying. He prayed early in the morning, so I didn't see him every day, but I remember just being intrigued with what is this that he is doing so early every morning. And he would get up, and his prayer notebook literally is this thick, and every page in there is another person that he's praying for. It has pictures, it has this cryptic short handwriting that most people can't read, and it intrigued me as a child. And so I remember one day sneaking into his office and finding his prayer notebook, and he would have shown me if I'd asked, but I just wanted to know what was in it, and so I sneaked in there, found his prayer notebook, was turning it and seeing all these pages of people that he was praying for, and just being amazed that, this was so important to my daddy, and realizing that I needed to be praying too. And yes, we talked about prayer. Yes, we prayed together at meals. We prayed together when issues came up. But it really was the fact that day after day after day after week after week after year, I saw my daddy praying and serious and fervent in his prayer, that I learned how important prayer was. And I learned to have a prayer life. So yes, do the other things too, but the most important is you pray. well,
Just that mic. Oh, yeah. Go for it.
No, I was gonna give it
Come
to
on
you.
for a second. Well, I had the same idea that Nikki did, and that's to model it and to include them when you're collecting prayer requests. You know, it's a family thing as well as a personal thing. So that's one way to get them involved with the family. And you want to let them have opportunities to pray. I'm loving to see that in grandchildren coming along. But you also want to continue to model for them, just things to pray about. Now you can think about a format if you want to, and you can look on Pinterest, you could look on Etsy for ideas, but one of them for really little ones is to pray their hand. So first thing they praise God. And then they thank God, and they can fold those fingers down if you want. And then they say, God, will you forgive me for this, this, and this? And then they can pray for other people. And then lastly, they can pray for the things that are concerning them. And you know why? It's because we all jump to the thumb. We all, hey, I've got these things I want to talk to you about, God. Well, this one just helps them get a format of making sure they're including praise and adoration. And then you've heard acts, adore, confess, supplication, or thanksgiving and supplication. Anyway, all those things can be of help as you're trying to teach your children about it.
And I don't have much to add, but I think it's also important for them to see how God answers prayer, right? We don't have a God that we just ask things of. We have a God that actually gives good things. So it's very important. And so a lot of times we would keep a journal and we'd write down our prayer requests, whatever they wanted to pray for. And then when we saw that God had answered that prayer, when did he do it and how did he do it? And then thanking him for that.
So just another way to kind of keep track of prayer, we did it every night as a family. We would gather together. Am I not on? Oh, how do I do it? Oh, maybe that? Voila. So as a family, we would pray together every night before bedtime. And so we would divide out the nights of the week. And so Monday we prayed for missionaries. Tuesdays we prayed for church family. Wednesday we prayed for Walters. That's our last name. Thursday we prayed for, Thursday was Thanksgiving. Friday was extended family. And Saturday was prepare our hearts for church. And then Sunday it was adoration. So we would all pray all together. And, it didn't take long, and we just built that habit. And then, of course, in the teen years, it probably started falling away, but by that time, it had been modeled for a long time. And then to tag on to what Connie has done, in counseling one time, I had a mom do the same thing with that, but instead of, on rocks, they would write a number on the bottom of a rock, and then that would be corresponding to an answer to prayer. And so every once in a while they would just be sitting around and they would just grab a rock out of the basket and say, what was number 25? And then we'd go look in their journal to see what number 25 was in their answer to prayer. So there's ways that you can make it creative for you to review that as a family.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
All right, I love all of those ideas, and I love seeing how they're all different and creative and make it fun, so that's great. Okay, so the next question is, how do we support, encourage, teach, discipline, children with ADHD or autism or anxiety? So we'll just, like I said, I told the ladies, I selected just 4 videos from Nikki to play just for sake of time. All of the videos I'll have posted online for you guys so you can watch them later. She answered every single question for us. So, but for sake of time and to give these ladies opportunities to share what they have, we're gonna share most of those online. And then if there's something that I remember from what she shared that I can add on to it, I'll do that too.
Would someone else like to start?
You can start.
Oh, brother. Well, I put down to feed them the truth about God and his character. I know that there are people here in the room that have worked with children with special needs more than I have. But I know in my life, when I need encouragement and support, it helps me tremendously to think about who God is, just what He's like. So for any kids that don't struggle with ADHD or with autism, for them as well, or even anxiety, let them know who their Heavenly Father is and what He's like, because they can remember that when they get in a tough situation. And I would say, help them learn Scripture that comes to bear on each of those situations. You know, what time I am afraid, I will trust in Thee, is one we used with our kids a lot, because when they were afraid, we wanted them to know that they had the backup right there. And just the individual verses that help with individual situations are helpful as well. Now for ADHD, I would probably try and correlate some movement along with memorization. And one thing that I have on my own phone is an app called Fighter Verses. You can pick out verses from there. They can do quizzes, they can hear it, they can block words out, they can just do fun things like that that make it more maybe enjoyable for them to be learning those verses. Figure out how the kid learns the best, and then use that to build the Scripture and the principles into their lives. And you know, when they're young, you don't have to do the whole verse. You can just start with a portion or the whole principle. Make it easy for them to understand it, and then help them practice. Like someday when they're having absolutely no trouble with their brother or their sister, you can say, hey, let's pretend that this is going on. Now let's practice. What would you do? And then just encourage them to talk to you about it. Help them strategize for when it comes up.
Well, I was blessed with 4 very active children. In fact, when my daughter was born, I distinctly remember before we came here, going out to a restaurant, and my daughter was crawling along the back seats, you know, and my husband and I looked at each other and said, our lives are ended. You know, we will never have a normal life again. You know, so I say that because after taking the parenting class, I realized that, you know, God doesn't give us perfect children, but He gives us perfect gifts. And the gifts are to make me more like Christ too, right? And so I guess I needed 4 hyperactive children to make me always at the foot of the cross, right? And now it's so funny, my kids, when they got older, you know, they were still a little handful, but everybody would say, well, I don't have obedient children like you do. And you just wanted to choke them, because it's like, they didn't come this way. We had to work hard for this. But anyway, parents are given the responsibility of raising their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. It doesn't matter how they come, right? Our goal is still the same. And so the expectations are still the same. You know, we are to bring them up, right? And, you know, but if you have a child with a learning disability or that struggles, you hold them accountable to the level of their ability, right? You may have a 5-year-old that is by developmental a 3-year-old, right? And so you hold them to the 3-year-old standard. Does that make sense? And you don't leave them at 3. You work with them so they become a 4-year-old, you know? And so it's a lot of work. I think parenting is one of the hardest jobs I've ever had. And I've had some hard jobs, you know, but it's a 24/7, 7 days a week. We don't get a day off, you know, but when we're weak, God is strong, you know? And I think that's the best thing that 4 hyperactive children got me, was I'm more dependent on, it was all God. And it's not about me being the perfect parent. It's about God working through me and me being faithful to what God has told me to do with my children. And that's not easy, but we want them to be, we want them to learn to love others, you know? And they can learn how to love others as we love them, even when they're not very lovely, right? we don't always like our children. We love them, but we don't always love them. I like them, you know. So that's God loves us just like that.
So I'm echoing a lot of what they said, but the goals are going to be the same for any child, and it's to love God and to love others. And I think the diagnosis sometimes gets us tripped up. So I think what you need to think of is the diagnosis maybe changes your strategy, but the goals are the same. And so there are a lot of people who have, walked that line and walked that life that, you really need to ask, but the ultimate goals need to be the same. And another thing to remember is God doesn't make any mistakes and he doesn't waste anything. So obviously, like Connie said, if you have a child with a diagnosis, you needed that child and that child needed you. So God made that family in a way that both of you can grow to glorify him the most. And so if having those things in mind hopefully can encourage you to keep on doing what's right, even though it's really hard.
Can I add one more thing?
See,
I already
could you
gave it.
refer to that tab again, please?
Fighter verses.
Fighter verses, okay.
Pretty sure I can look. I just wanted to share this with you. There's some authors that have really helped me through the years as I was raising my children. And I just wanted to share this to go along with what the gal said. This is from Elise Fitzpatrick. She wrote a book with her daughter-in-law, Give Them Grace. The Lord teaches us of his grace in the gospel through difficult children. We learn what it's like to love like he loved. So it's there in our personal upper room where we learn to wash the feet of those that are betraying us. It's there, kneeling before our rebellious children, that the real power of God is demonstrated.
That's great. So my little plug from what Nikki has to say, she talked mostly about anxiety because she said that's what she had the most personal experience with. But she said the opposite of fear is not always courage, but it's trust. And then she talked about helping teach your children to trust the Lord. And she said, one quote that she said that I thought was really good was, God is all in and we can trust him. So that's my little plug to get you to want to watch the rest of her video. That's really great.
What are some things that you can do as a family to open a kid's eyes to how grateful they should be, even when they currently aren't?
Well, I guess we're just going to keep repeating this. It's the best way is to model it, right? You have to ask yourself throughout the day, what do my children hear me saying? Oh, I have to do the dishes. I have to clean. No, not the toilets again. Right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you'll hear them have a bad view of work, And so to be thankful in that, are we thankful to make our children thankful? And one of the things that we did is I loved summertime because even though we homeschooled some and we went to school here, summers are a great time. We had this rule that my kids weren't in anything extra during the summer. I got them. Do you see? And summer was like an intense course to whatever we needed to be on. And I remember one thing, thankfulness, my husband always told me, unthankfulness is usually a sign that children have too much, right? If you think about it, a starving child doesn't complain about having rice every day. They're thankful for the rice because they don't have a choice, right? And that they don't always get rice. So sometimes, it's a different way of looking at unthankfulness is having too much. And so one summer I specifically remembered, my kids got the unthankful spirit. And so we spent all summer on thankfulness. And every week of the summer, we focused on being thankful for something. Like one was thankful for our neighbors. And what all do the neighbors do for us? And we would serve our neighbors by taking in their trash cans. We would make cookies. And we would, just bring them notes, we would do. And then one week it was the pastors and the staff at the church. And then one week it was for our relatives. And, we just made a list of all the things that we were thankful for. And we just concentrated on that during this time where we didn't have any distractions. No homework except mine. So anyway.
And something I remember us doing, we played something called a grace detective. And so they were supposed to spend all day pointing out things where they were shown grace, unmerited favor. And, you know, it was fun, but it was really eye-opening when you would spend days on days trying to be a Grace detective. I just remember doing that one time with our kids. And, yeah, and I can't echo enough to Connie, you know, what is your spirit? How are you communicating? And, you know, when you're not content and grateful, it's what they see.
I was gonna say too, one of the things I love to do is like catch them doing right. And so even something like, if I saw that, way to go. You know, just at some time when they accidentally happen to be grateful. And one thing too, if they get discouraged about it, you know, encourage them with the fact that you're exactly the kind of person Jesus loved to hang around. He doesn't expect you to be perfect. But boy, he loved to hang with people that had trouble sometimes. And he can, you know, he can fill in the gaps there and help you to grow, because everything good that's going to happen to you grows in the soil of gratefulness. That's where it starts. Otherwise, you probably won't recognize it.
I was thinking too, you know, my mind has to think about what we did, but it was really good when they were unthankful, we made them stop, because put off, put on, right? And we made them like, okay, you need to list 5 things you're thankful for about your sister, about your brother, right? Because, you know, they have to learn to not just don't be unthankful, they have to learn to be thankful.
Can I give you one more? I love this example. I was in Sunday night church, and I was walking up towards the front of the auditorium when church was over, and I heard this little guy sitting on his grandpa's lap, and he was ripping his parents. He was so mad, and he was complaining to Grandpa about the parents. Well, Grandpa happened to be a biblical counselor, so the guy was so little he hadn't really figured out Grandpa was going to give him a dose of truth. But what he said to him was, who gave you those parents? And the little guy said, God. I mean, he knew the answer. And Grandpa said, okay, so who are you really mad at? So when they're griping at you about something, maybe you can try a little bit of that conversation I overheard accidentally, but really stuck with me.
That's good.
All right, so the next question is helping kids find good friends. And so I'm going to play Nikki's answer on this one.
The best way to have your kids have good friends is to pray. And pray, and pray, and pray. Because God's the one that brings the right people into your kids' life that will make them more like Christ. And the truth of the matter is, I don't know best what will make my children more like Christ. God does. And so I need to be trusting the God of the universe, whose goal is to make my child into his image, to bring the right people into their lives, to make them most in his image. So I trust God, and I pray, and I pray, and I pray. And then I invest in my kids, and I spend time with my kids. I invite their friends over, I invest in their friends, I help disciple them so that they become the kind of friends that would best glorify God, and I help them grow, and I help my child grow, and I help my child learn to be God's kind of friend. And if I am helping my child to be a godly friend, and I'm helping them see what do we do to encourage friends, what do we do to confront friends in sin, some of that's going to just naturally shake out. Because if they are being the right kind of friends, and they are encouraging good and confronting sin in appropriate ways, not judgmentally, and they're asking forgiveness when they sin and making things right and dealing with problems the way God wants us to do in a relationship, then friends that aren't willing to have that kind of friendship are going to start to fall away. And friends that want that kind of relationship are going to stick around. And then we'll have more opportunity to pray for them, to disciple them, and to help build the kind of friends that they need.
Okay, first. Oh. Well, I just like Nikki said, teaching your child how to be a good friend is the best way for them to have that discernment about what being a good friend is. And I do remember this being more of a struggle with my daughter than my boys, believe it or not. Surprise, surprise, right? You know, just friendships were just always felt like the drama land. And so, you know, we would just do a Bible study, just she and I, about friendships. It was a special time for us to grow. And then we really encouraged her to look for people who needed a friend and not be it about her. And I get it, you know, you want them to have fun, but when the focus became on serving others, then the friendship thing became less big when, you know, she was left out, because then she was looking for the other people who were left out. And so I think God really grew a heart for her for vulnerable people, and so that was a helpful thing for us to do.
Yeah, I was thinking girls seem to struggle more with that, and I just always think that you know, when you struggle with a problem, you step back, and Rita Jameson taught me this. It's not mine, but she said you always think about what you haven't taught them, right? And so we seem to think that they know what a friend is, and usually their idea of a friend is somebody I have fun with that likes me, right? That's it. That's as deep as it goes. And friendship is so much more than that, you know? And, you know, we all know that we want them like-minded, you know, our true closest core friends, we want them telling them the same thing that we're telling them, right? Not, oh, it's okay, you'll get away with it, right? So, you know, I think like Lori said, teaching on what a true friend is, what are we looking for? Because you got to know what you're looking for so that they'll be able to recognize you are not a true friend. You just want to control me, or you just want to tell me what I can wear and what I can't. I mean, you know, in 5th grade, it's pink is bad. Only babies wear pink. I mean, you know, right? That's where they are. And so that's not a friend, right? So I think if they recognize that, and as you study that, then they become that kind of friend, then they are going to be the friend to the friendless, right? Because everybody is controlled by those people. We know who those people are, right? Probably everyone has those people in your mind, right? That kind of take control of the classroom, you know. You could probably speak more about that.
Of the classroom.
Yeah.
Actually, they reminded me of a story of a little guy when I was teaching 3rd grade one year. And he came up to me, and his feelings were hurt because his friend had made a crack about his project that he turned in. And in wanting to help him understand that with friendships, you know, it's 2 of us that are sinners. And yeah, it sounded like that didn't come across very nice. So let's talk about that for a minute. You know, you kind of have a couple of options here. You can look at that and say, maybe he just made a mistake and didn't mean it like it sounded, and it hurt my feelings, and he didn't know that. In which case you could say, I'm going to let love cover that one. And the other option would be that you would need to talk to him about it. You would need to go to that other little guy in this case. Yeah, how is it the guys too sometimes, you know, not always the girls. But you could go to him and say, you know, that really hurt my feelings when we said that. Did you mean that to be mean? Or, you know, just go calmly, go quietly. Don't go in with guns blazing. Just ask and find out. And I said, you'll have to decide which way you're going to handle that. But if you allow it to get in your heart and just dig around and stir it up and stir it up and stir it up, you're going to have trouble going calmly. So I'd suggest that you pray and ask God to help you figure out which way you need to do it. Just an example from back in the day. Let's see, I think there was one more thing. Oh, one of the things that I think is helpful is to say when they come with a new friend, well, what about that friend did you like? You know, did you see Jesus in them? And that helps reinforce what we were trying to teach about the qualities that they're looking for.
Next question. How do you establish quality time as kids get, how do you establish quality family time as kids get older?
Who would like to begin on that one? I'll give you a chance.
Well, so like I said, we homeschooled, so you know, take that with a grain of salt. So it probably was easier for us in some ways, but I do have to tell you that when my oldest was 16, he had a list of 16 things he wanted to do extracurricular. So homeschoolers, you know, so one of the things that we did as a family as they got older is we made Sunday night kind of like it was family time, and we would do a lot of reading together. We read Instrument in the Redeemer's Hands, we read Heaven, we read Tozer's Attributes of God. So we would spend that time as family time reading and discussing things. Of course, that wasn't in elementary, that was, you know, like in junior high and high school. But we did do that even when they were busy, so we kind of kept that as, you know, sacred time. Of course, you know, sometimes we weren't there, but we did try to make that a priority. Then we also, meal times, we really worked really hard to eat together as a family. I know it's really hard with sports, but I would haul supper to them, and we would eat often in this parking lot before clubs on Wednesday night. So, I mean, if you want to make it happen, you can make it happen if it's a priority. And then when it came to quality family time, I mean, you have to have time. And I understand there's a lot of things that are important for your kids to do, but you also have to factor into what that looks like in eternity. And so with those 16 things that my son wanted to do, we built a matrix or a rubric that we had to filter everything through before someone could do something outside of the home. And so I don't even remember all the questions, but one was, you know, would it help you grow to be like Jesus? Could you serve other people? Did it strengthen, I think, our family bonds? And then I think the other one was, could you use it for credit for school? Because we're homeschooled, you can count lots of things. Or vocational training, like would it be helpful for you as you graduated to put on your resume or whatever? And so when you look through those things, the kids had to be able to explain how it fit one of those criteria. And sometimes there were some really creative answers because they really wanted to do it. But it really helped them figure out their own priorities. So this was, you know, junior high, high school. But I would encourage you to have priorities about what you do. So because anything that takes away from time for a family, you really need to guard that time together.
Yeah, I remember Pastor Good, the first pastor here, saying that the main ammunition against peer pressure is family time. You know, and so don't underestimate family time, because if your kids are having a great time as a family, they don't need to look elsewhere to have a good time, right? And I mean, not to say that that's wrong, but do you understand? It's like it's very important that you spend time as a family and make time. So while the kids were growing up, we had one day of the week, I think it was Tuesday night, that was family time. And what we did is one kid got to pick the restaurant, one kid got to pick what we did. And then, you know, if there was complaints, you know, like, I don't want to eat there, you know, who wants to? Then they lost their turn next time, you know, because unthankfulness, right? A sign they've been given too much. So that's what we did, and it really helped that, you know, they got some input in what we did. And then in the summertime, we would write down what they wanted to do. And then we would schedule it on the, you know, like they wanted to go to the zoo or they wanted to go to the children's museum. And so we would schedule it so that their input was important too to our family time. So, yeah.
I would just add one thing to that. It's been fun to watch my daughter raise her 4 daughters. And, you know, the youngest one's 12, so they're getting on through the years. One of the things she does is she only shops about once every 2 weeks, but it's about a 20-minute drive to the town. She takes one of the girls with her. So they've got all that talk time in the car. She hears all sorts of things. And then maybe that's their day. If they've been saving up to want to go to Hobby Lobby or whatever besides the grocery store, they'll do that. It's like their day. They have lunch together. She just kind of makes it a special time for the 2 of them. And so, you know, every 2 months she gets through all 4 and they get it done. The other thing I would say that I've watched her do is a tea time. Well, it's all girls, so I don't see boys sitting down for tea time, but that's a great talk time for them. And then with the 4 girls, one girls' night was Monday night, one was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they just have talk time before bed. Everybody'd get in bed, the other three would just nod off, and she would talk with that one. And she said their hearts opened up at that time like no other time. You know, so it was just time well spent.
I got one more thing. I just remembered, because I had one girl and 3 boys, so.
Tea time,
No
yeah.
tea time. But one thing I learned with boys is you feed them and their mouth opens up. I mean, every Friday, we would go to happy hour at Steak and Shake, because they have half-price milkshakes and then the shoestring fries with cheese. And I'm telling you, they would just, it was like, here, have another fry, tell me more, you know, because boys aren't as communicative as girls, you know. Everything else.
Yeah, we did talk night, and that was really good. I've forgotten about that one too. It's been a long time, folks, so it's really hard to remember everything. But I notice with boys, they always want to eat. But if you just sit in their presence, no agenda, you just sit, they'll eventually start talking to you. Just sit. So if they're watching sports, just go sit. Even husbands, it works that way.
So a couple of takeaways from what Nikki said was that, like she made a point to mention how it will change through the different stages that they're in. And I thought that was a good thing to remember, because sometimes I know I can hold on too tightly to, well, this is how we always do it, but things are changing, how do we do this? And then she also talked about making sure that you're on the same page as your husband and to submit to his leadership of what things should look like, even if it doesn't look like how you think it should look. And then she also mentioned they would make a point to have supper together as well. And she said even at times when her husband would be working late and they wouldn't have dinner until like 7 o'clock at night or later, she said to them it was more important to have family time than to get the kids to bed early. So, and then one other thing, she also talked some too about some tips of how to pick what activities to have the kids involved with. So something else you can listen to in your time. So, our next question is the best ways to incorporate Bible studies daily in your home and not just principles.
Go ahead.
Well, I think it's real important. You know, we think of Bible study as like, okay, we're all going to sit down, open our Bibles, but really, you know, in Deuteronomy it says, teach them as you go, right? And so you're always looking for that opportunity to teach the biblical principle. You know, and I think kids learn better that way because they like the, you know, as they're doing it, it makes it real to them. And so also we had this, I don't know, you've probably seen this. I love this book, Instructions in Righteousness. And it does all the work for you. It's so good because, you know, it's like, okay, I'm struggling with my kids. I need to, whatever they're struggling with, thankfulness. So we're going to do a Bible study on thankfulness. Well, you look up in this thing and it says thankfulness. And then it says what happens or should happen to this person if they're not thankful. What happens, what's the opposite of thankfulness? And it has stories from Scripture and it's written there so you can see it. You don't have to look it up, right? It's like it's your study done for you, and then you can go to the Bible. It's like, oh, I like that one. You know, oh, I like that one. And then it talks about the blessings of being thankful. Stories that illustrate the value of being thankful. Verses to memorize. So it's like a little Bible study on the topic that you're struggling with. And this thing, I mean, if you look at the table of contents, pride, self-righteousness, shifting blame, hypocrisy, stubbornness, self-will, disobedience, defiance, scorner, arguing, complaining, right? Does anybody's kids struggle with those things?
Or their parents.
Or their parents. That has laziness, impatience, anger. I mean, it's all here. You know, so this was a major resource for me when my kids were little.
Okay. I'd say start small. You know, maybe you have a children's Bible study book and get your Bible out at the same time so that they see your Bible, and then you read this story. You go, do you know where that comes from? Right here. Here, look at it, read it. Well, they can't read when they're preschoolers, but so what? Let them look right at that spot in the Bible, and that is where that came from. And so that's how you can start a Bible study. I have been in BSF for about 40,000 years. It's a Bible study fellowship. And one of the things they do with the little kids there is they've got little cloth Bibles, for Pete's sakes. And they don't have any words on the inside, but they hold them and they have a quiet time where they're holding their Bible and they begin to esteem the Bible itself. And that's what you want. You know, I'm not trying to do a full-fledged Bible study when they're 2.5. No, none of us are. But look where it comes from, and look how important that is. Oh, and then as they get a little bit older, maybe you can read a passage of Scripture to them, but choose a very readable version. This isn't the time when you need the word-for-word translation Bible that you're going to use to study in a class on studying Scriptures. This is one that they're going to understand, and then just talk about, hey, what'd you hear in that? And I would say start in the Psalms and let them kind of work their way into things before you get into big theological things. Just a quick thought.
So yeah, I think it's a both and. You want them to understand the Bible, and you can't not teach the principles. But we used nap time when they were really little, and we did the Kenneth Taylor's little
Little visits with God, or
little Bible pictures for little
Little
eyes.
oh, okay.
The illustrations were just gorgeous, like they were real artwork, but they had just little bitty stories.
Mhm.
And there's so many good little storybooks now that you guys probably know what they are. I know, because it's been a long time ago, but I know there's good ones. So I think tying it to something that is done every day makes it really easy to remember. So we did it at nap time every night, every day before I would lay down, just a little bit. And then we also would review. We had little Sunday school cards. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
And I put them on a ring, and we would just review them. And so I don't know what they send home now, but you could even review the Sunday school lesson with your kids, because having them tie into what they learned in church is really good for them to see that applies in their everyday life. It's not just Sunday. So those are some of the things. And then as they got older, for their own Bible study time, we would give them tools. So there are some wonderful younger Bible studies, either their own Bible, like Sandy talked about, and there's like graphic Bibles. It would be really good for kids who are maybe hesitant readers, or boys in particular, and give them time to read the Bible. Like if you're not allowing them time in their day to spend time in God's Word, because you fill it up with so many other things, they're never going to get to it. So you need to make that a priority for them, and you're the parent, so you can help them set their schedule.
I'll take it just a quick minute. We also used to use Keys for Kids. I don't know if you've heard that. It has a verse and questions and just a good story. And then I think right before nap time is kind of genius. Like what kid wants a nap? The parents are the ones that want the naps. And so, give that little fella or that little girl a chance to stall their nap time just a little bit, but doing a great thing.
So one little add-on from Nikki was that they would act it out. Like they would pick a different Bible story or be working through a passage, and they would act out the passage. And so she had this cute story of when they were acting out David and Goliath, and her son wanted to do it one more time, and her husband goes, "We can't do it one more time, I'm dead." And her son goes, "Take, take, 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 now you're all better," because he had cut off his neck, like Goliath's cut off, or like David cut off Goliath's neck. And so he fixed his neck so they could redo it.
All right, our next question. How would you handle conflict with a Christian family member who watches your child during the week but maybe doesn't agree with or follow all of your parenting choices?
And
You want to play Nikki?
we're gonna start with Nikki. Maybe if I can find my cursor. Anybody see me? Okay. Very good. There, you see it? Okay.
to think about in a situation like this. And honestly, the most important is not the issue between your child and you and your mother-in-law. The most important issue is what God expects of you as your husband's wife. And I say that because I think in dealing with in-laws, we fail to remember that God commanded each of us to honor our father and mother. And so my husband has been commanded by God to honor his father. His mother's in heaven, so that no longer applies, but his father. And I, as his wife, am commanded to help my husband. And one of the best ways I can help my husband is to help him please God. Well, if God has commanded him to honor his parents, one of the ways that I can help my husband please God is to help him honor his parents, which means that that's my focus in dealing with my in-laws. It's not about my relationship with in-laws. It's about my husband's relationship with God. And that reframes the entire relationship. If I'm really thinking, this is about my husband honoring God, not about me getting my way, my mother-in-law getting her way. It's not about that. How can I best help my husband honor God in a sticky situation? And so, if I have a disagreement with my mother-in-law, that's how I need to frame that disagreement. And go into that disagreement thinking, all right, my husband is commanded to honor her. How can I best help my husband to honor her? And I would say, talk to him. What does he say? What does he think is the best way for you to honor her? And then I need to submit to my husband there. And I need to do what's best to honor her. Not as and I should never, ever, ever have my husband have to choose between his mother and me. I'm his first earthly relationship. So that's not up for debate. God says that. But he still has to honor his mom. And that is not in conflict with me being first. As a young wife, it's easy to feel that it is. But it's a measure of, do I trust God enough to trust my husband to love me best? And as I trust God with my husband's relationship, then can I love my mother-in-law through that. And then, there's an issue that is discussed in this scenario that that deals with fear. And I would say just kind of like what I talked about with dealing with fear with the children. If there's fear involved, that's a separate issue. I need to deal with whatever fear or worry or any sin that's involved on my part. If I am being fearful, I'm not trusting God, and I'm not trusting my husband to lead me well, and I'm not submitting well to God, and I'm not submitting well to my husband, I need to deal with my own issues of my heart, whether it's fear or whatever my issues are. And then interact with my mother-in-law without having my own sin be the log in my eye. Because remember, we need to first take the log out of our own eyes when we're dealing with others. So that needs to be dealt with out of my own eye. And then I need to deal with her in submission to my husband and seeking to glorify God by helping him honor his mother. And that can look a lot of different ways, but there's a lot of steps that need to come before a confrontation with a mother-in-law. And I would say that's enough work to start on right there.
I've got one right here. This question really resonated with me. And so I have too much written down. Some of it will be similar to what Nikki was saying, and I'll skip over those parts. But I would say that you'd begin to pray for your mother-in-law right away and your relationship with her. You know, in church a couple of weeks ago, there was that Dietrich Bonhoeffer quote that came up in all the sermons. I can no longer condemn or hate a brother for whom I pray.
Yeah.
No matter how much trouble he causes me. His face that hitherto may have been strange and intolerable to me is transformed through intercession into the countenance of a brother for whom Christ died. Now, I had to put that into practice when I was an academic advisor over at Ivy Tech. There was an academic advisor that, doggone, if you wouldn't do the work and she'd take the credit. And I was getting mad about that. Well, that's a whole lot of problems on my part, but I began to pray for her. And God did change my heart to the point where I'm no longer like looking for things that girl did. I'm now just looking for her. And that's what God may be up to in your situation. You want to look to build your relationship with her. And I will tell you something that for people that have been around here for a while, Bob LaFew taught me this. You have got to sandwich your approach to confrontation. You need to be busy about building the relationship first so that when there's trouble, you can go on a foundation to talk about what the problem is. And then don't just leave it there. Come back. The other part of the sandwich is something else that's kind or loving to either do or say in that situation. You need to be praying for opportunities to encourage her. Like maybe you make a list of the things or the qualities that you're thankful for about her, and you begin to study her. What are her likes and dislikes? And you try and come up with some gentle answers. Can I read that little bit part? Mother-in-law had snapped back at daughter-in-law, and she said, it just made me shut down. So you know what I'd do if I were you? I'd start coming up with a list of potential kind answers. That when you get in a situation like that and you feel like you're overwhelmed, you don't have to shut down. So in that situation, mother-in-law had said, well, I raised 3 kids, I'm not a dummy. And you can say, oh, I know you're not a dummy. I really love one of those 3 kids you raised. And I'm really thankful that you raised such a wonderful son for me to marry. Turn it. Inject it with grace, because that's really, really important there. And what I know in my own life is if I'm having trouble extending grace to someone, I'm forgetting how much grace I've already received. And then I find myself in a real battle between judgment and extending grace. So, and definitely the talk with your husband to make sure you two are on the same page, and he can talk to mama for you, most likely, if he's willing. He may be seeing things that are going on with you where you need to do some changing too. And then can I share one little quote? So I'm going to read it to you. From Relationships, A Mess Worth Making by Timothy Lane and Paul Tripp. Relationships are going to push you beyond the limits of your ability to love, serve, and forgive. They will push you beyond you. At times, they're going to beat at the borders of your faith, and at times, they'll exhaust you. And in certain situations, your relationships will leave you disappointed and discouraged. They will require what you do not seem to have, but that's exactly as God intended it. That's precisely why He placed these demanding relationships in the middle of the process of sanctification, where God progressively molds us into the likeness of His Son.
So, you guys, I love y'all, but sometimes your generation is a lot of work, just to be perfectly honest. From all of the social media, you guys are under a lot of pressure. So I think, and now I'm talking like a grandma, there are so many concerns about what kids eat, what they can do, what they can't do. So I'm kind of wondering, I don't know the situation, but sometimes as the grandparent, you're terrified that you're going to offend the parent because you don't do everything exactly right. And so sometimes I think you have to, I'm not saying the situation, the grandma was fine, but just kind of always take that with a grain of salt, that, you know, you have them most of the time, and if you have goals and priorities for your kids, that's great. And I'm not talking about life and death allergies, like, don't, you know, I'm not being crazy, but, you know, if they feed them a little bit too much sugar under their watch, you know, maybe just be okay with that. And I think sometimes we're just, you guys have so much pressure on you these days, and we were just talking about it. We loved our kids, and we had maybe a couple books that we read, and we had people we trusted, and then we just raised our kids. We didn't have like all of the information overload that you guys have, so anyway, that would just be my 2 cents. And just because she's a Christian, she may not know how to solve problems. Like, we are so blessed here at Faith to talk about how to solve problems. You would be shocked how many Christians really, really don't. And so all the counsel about how to solve the problems with the mother-in-law would be, I think, really helpful to keep that in mind.
And I was just gonna add, the thing, again, you know, we have this little paragraph, we don't know all the details. So the thing that stood out to me was that she watches my toddler during the week. I mean, see, you know, you can't undo the thankfulness. Are you thankful that you have maybe free childcare? I don't know, you know, but being a grandma myself, you know, it's like we're giving up ourselves sometimes to serve you, and it's not being recognized as a service, and you just want us to do more, you know, more. We're already giving up 5 days, you know, we could be giving up 5 days of our week to watch our grandkids and your children, you know, so just make sure you're balanced with expectations and service, you know, like what are they doing for you and what are you doing for them, you know? So we tend to be in a what's that kind of society? A taker society.
Consumer.
Consumer society. So just beware.
Well, first off, I want to just thank you ladies, because I know you guys shared some things with us that I'm sure were a little hard to share, because they stepped on our toes a little, right? Like, in a good way, and we need to be thankful for that, because I know for me there was a lot I needed to hear in there, and I'm sure each one of us could take a lot from that. So thank you ladies for loving us in that way. Now the next question is, what advice would you have on helping kids through extreme temper tantrums? Beyond falling on the floor, where they're breaking things and chucking hard objects in anger. They said that they've been doing time in and time out for regular tantrums and spankings for violence, but they don't feel like they're getting anywhere with it. She's also added, we are limiting our requests.
Well, I'm having a little bit of PTSD on this, because I had one child that was really struggled with anger, and I remember, you know, we had tried spanking, we had tried, you know, and it's just like he was almost like, I mean, I know he wasn't, but I just thought, is this what a possessed person looks like? You know what I mean? Because they were so out of control, you know? So my husband, who's very wise, he did what they call the hold. And so he would put them on the ground, and he would not sit on their legs, and he would hold their hands down by their side, and he would hold them. But while he was holding them, he would say, "You are fighting me. You are hitting me. You are trying to bite me. You are trying," you know, he would tell them what they were doing, and then he would tell them what they needed to do. You need to relax. You need to, you know, get self-control. Daddy is helping you get self-control, okay? And I remember with this specific child, of course, I'm crying on the stairs, right? You know, I'm praying and crying, you know, because it's not for parenting is not for the faint-hearted. Mm-hmm. And this went on for an hour and a half. And finally, he went, you know, you could tell when they give up. You could tell their muscles are up. And then he'd say, "Good job, you got control. Now, we're going to get our spanking," because, right, that was all, he hasn't got his discipline yet. So he would get his spanking, and then they would talk some more. They would love, they would hug and love. And then, it's like, oh, thank you, the Lord. I was just so, and then the next time it was an hour. And then the next time it was 45 minutes. And then the next time it was 20 minutes. And every time we would say, do we need to help you get self-control? And they knew what that meant. And they knew they were going to lose, right? So that way, you're not hurting them, you're just holding them. Because, you picture, it's like, is that a problem or not a problem? And my husband would always say, look ahead. What does this look like as a 15-year-old? Ugh, that's scary, right? So it's real important while they're young and little that they know that they can trust you. You're not hurting them, but that you're helping them, and you're praying. You can pray while you're doing that so that they know what they're doing. But it got to be, all we had to do was do that statement. Do we need to help you get self-control? And they would say no. And then that was it. So it yeah.
Well, and I think it's really important in these instances and just in general when you're raising your children is to define their behavior in terms of biblical behavior, as in when they're sinning. Yep. Because then I think it really helps your resolve that you need to deal with it. It's not just, it's a stage they're going through, oh, they're too tired. I mean, as parents, we don't want to set them up for failure. Of course, you need to make sure they're well rested and they're fed and all that stuff, but that does not negate their responsibility to obey and to please the Lord. So when you start using biblical terms, it helps them understand that they are rebelling against a holy God, and then it also helps strengthen your resolve that you need to spend 2 hours working with your child. And I think also, we also need to realize that when my kids failed, it was often because I was not teaching them enough. And so there were a lot of, and I think for some children, being out of control is really helpful. For our kids, a lot of what we did was like what Sandy did. They would act out things, but we would act out we would have a parent do the bad behavior, and then we would do a parent doing the right behavior, and then we would have the child model it. And of course, they would be giggling and silly because, especially Jeff would ham it up and Daddy's being silly. We would also do it with stuffed animals, and then I would talk all day long. Like if there was a particular thing, a behavior that we were trying to change. One time I was doing with another kid that I was watching, and one of my kids said, "Are you trying to brainwash them?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am. I am." So I would do it like every time I changed a diaper, because that was another memory. Okay, we're going to talk about how I want you to behave when I drop you off in the nursery. So we would talk about that all week long, and people would think, "Oh, they don't know," but they know. And so we would model and teach and be consistent with the discipline, not just because they were tired. And then also just kind of questioning, sometimes spankings are not good spankings. They're swats on the behind and they make the kid mad. So you really need to understand what controlled biblical spanking is. I know that's not in favor anymore. But it is a very different thing than just swatting a kid a couple of times out of anger. There needs to be a controlled amount, and if you do it sufficiently, you don't do it as often.
That's true. That is true. I was just going to say, too, to take time to explain to the child why you're spanking them. Reassure them that you love them, but because God requires of you certain things as a parent, you just can't let them continue in this bad behavior, because that's required of you by God. That's what He tells you to do as the parent. And so I had an incident when one of my two was young, and he was so whoops. Forget that. The person was so young that we hadn't even begun to talk about forgiveness. Really, we started with "I'm sorry," and then we moved into "I need to ask for forgiveness." Well, something had gone wrong, would not say "I'm sorry," went to the crib, stayed in the crib, took a nap in the crib, And, this day was just getting long, long, long. And I would go in and check. And finally, I went in. My other child followed in and said, well, maybe, this person just can't even say, I'm sorry. And from the crib, we heard, no, I don't want to say I'm sorry. At which point, I called Pastor Myers. And here's some of the wisdom he gave me. Stop that behavior first, which we did by going to the crib, and then win and win big.
Yeah.
Just because you're tired of the conflict, don't give up contending. Contend. Because they need it. It's for them. It's more important than what you want right now. And some children are more strong-willed than others. And then get face to face with them and say, you're not allowed to act that way and be a part of this family. So when you can change your behavior, then we'll allow you to come back out and join us with all the fun that we're having. Sorry, you're going to have to miss out on that. But until you can control so those kinds of strategies to help you help the child, if that's the main thing. We got to help that child learn how to get under control, as you say, and begin to know that you're under God and they're under you, and that's by God's design.
I just wanted to say one thing. I've kind of blocked out a lot of this, but the support of your spouse is very key, especially if you're raising boys, right? Because there comes a time when, like, I'm short, I'm not, the boys have a lot more, they could overpower me, right? And so my husband made it quite clear that if they had problems with me, they had problems with him. And so we would call in to my husband's office, and we'd make an appointment to be seen in an exam room, and my husband would spank him, because I didn't want it to wait until they got home, because it just happened. So he would do the spanking in the exam room, and then they'd come out a changed person. It was like everybody wanted to know what happened in there. That's amazing.
I would just say this one more thing, that you want to continue always to point them to Jesus and help them understand that, of course, they're struggling. That's why Jesus came. He knew that you would need him for a time just like this.
So one add-on from Nikki was that she mentioned making sure that you're limiting your distractions. And I know, because I've seen it from experience personally, when you're distracted, your kids are vying for your attention, and if that means getting your attention through angry outbursts, that's what they'll do. So I thought that was a good add-on. So we, unfortunately, are starting to run out of time. I wish we had another hour. So if we could, ladies, I'm going to spring this on you. Could I have each one of you pick one of the last 3 questions and answer that? So I don't know how you want to divide those up. If there's one that you feel passionate about, just give like a 2-minute answer on those if you could.
I already said that.
Oh,
I'll just start with 9, and you guys can start fighting.
okay, then I'll be 10. Arm wrestle.
Paper, scissors, or something. So one of the things about number 9 is, oh, sorry. How does a single mom start discipline when has been poor or none at all, rebellious spirit in a teen? Sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, sir. How does a single mom start discipline when it has been poor or none at all? It has a rebellious spirit in a teen. So one of the things you have to know is that child is never out of the work of God. So, but if it has been a failure on your part, then you need to ask forgiveness from God and that child, because you have not done what God has called you to do. With a teen, your time is running out, so you need to be praying like none other. But you need to be really open, and that's an opportunity to really teach the child. You can tell them, I didn't teach you right, but this is what you need to do. And there's some great things through our Joyful Journey podcast, just the last one about biblical authority, have your teen listen to that with you and then discuss it. That is a really, really good one, I think, in this, especially for this generation. I mean, all of the podcasts of Joyful Journey is great, but that one was just really good about biblical authority. And then just really encourage the teen to read the Bible with you, read books together. I mean, at that point, you really can have some great conversations. And at that point, and you will find also, even though with little ones you can force their behavior, the battle is always going to be between them and God. And so with the teen, it's just going to be obvious because you're not going to be able to control them like a toddler. But their story's not over. God can still be in charge. So there's still hope, Mama.
Your question, then I'll swing back.
Oh, I was
think
hoping we
yours
wouldn't
might
have
take more.
time. No, just kidding. No. How do I help my child learn respectfulness? What does a biblical culture of cultivating respect look like in a household with small children, age range, toddler, preschool, and elementary? And I think this again, hear me say it again, it's about modeling. And how does your kids hear you talk to your husband, right? Because if you are disrespectful to him, they are going to learn that behavior to you. So, just watch your words. Kids don't learn bad words, they hear bad words, and respectfulness, again, you could do a study on respectfulness. Instructions in Righteousness has a chapter on it. Stories that illustrate respectfulness. I just think modeling when they're young is the most important, and co-doing thankfulness with that.
Okay. I was just gonna, come up with a pregame strategy on that as far as developing respectfulness, like require eye contact and tell them, here's what I'm gonna expect you to do when we get with, maybe it's their teacher or whoever, some adult probably that they're gonna be around, and that wait for it until they raise their eyes to meet either your eyes or the person that you're talking to. And if you're not getting it, get them out of that situation and begin to ask them some questions like, what is it I asked you to do? Where are your eyes supposed to be? Do you remember what James 4:17 says? When you know the right thing to do and you don't do it, that's sin. And so don't ask them why. I'll tell you why. They're sinners, just like their parents. And that's why they do those things. So go after the real detailed questions, the whats and the wheres and those kinds of things. Okay, now, sorry to jump on that, how to stop them from lying. And I think, and that's at an age range of a toddler. Well, frequently with a toddler, there are the telltale signs of the crime. I didn't eat that chocolate and it's all over, right here. So use those things to ferret out what the truth is, and then once again, don't ask why. They cannot formulate those answers. They need concrete questioning techniques like, what happened? What did you do? What happened first? They're not able to articulate the desires of their heart that brought about the action. And so they need guided questions. So you can get them to the point of, did you know the right thing to do? Did you do it? Well, what does the Bible say about that? And, just let your Bible fall open to James 4:17. Mine did when I was the elementary principal. It's true, because we needed it a lot. And then when they do tell the truth, even when it may seem to be to their peril, then reinforce that behavior. Maybe that's the time you forego the normal consequences that would have come about and explain why you're not giving consequences at this point, because you told the truth. And I'm so thankful that you did. Build that. Now you'll get consequences if you do it again, but this time you told me the truth and I'm so happy. I'm not going to give you those consequences this particular time. I think I could stop there or pass it on for the last few seconds, or what would you like?
We'll stop there.
We'll stop there.
I'm gonna tear down the room too. So for each of those 3 questions there, Nikki had answers to on her videos, so I'll get those posted for you all, or ask my tech team to do that. But I wanted to take some time, I'm gonna stand up because I feel like I can see everybody better. But I want to encourage each of you, when I got together with Nikki Lambeth to do these videos, it was such an encouragement to me personally. And she told me multiple times, be sure, if there's anybody who wants my number, give it to them, because I would love to meet with them. She said that's her way of ministering to people now, since she can't be in this church building. So she makes her own homemade tea. I saw where she grows the ingredients for her tea, and I drank her tea. It's chai tea, it's delicious, it's amazing, and the conversation's even better. So, and we have so many wonderful wise women at this church, and our pastor has encouraged us to reach out to the ladies, like these ladies who've been with our church for a long time, and get to know them. And I want to encourage you, don't feel like you're a burden to them. Make time in your schedule, ask them, you'll be a blessing to them, and you will be so incredibly blessed. Like, I was even just blessed with these ladies' response to, hey, will you come and do this for us? It was, yes, I will do it, with excitement, with joy. And I know I've been incredibly thankful for each of their answers, and I'm probably going to need to watch this video over a couple times to just glean all the wisdom. So I want to encourage each of you to do that. And then I'm going to close us in a word of prayer. And one thing though, if you don't know of an older lady to ask to get together for coffee or tea or whatever, I know your mentor moms probably know of several. These ladies probably know of more. I can help get you connected. I know Jennifer could too. There's just so many wise, wonderful women. And like, I know there's been a time where I was struggling with something, and I called up one lady in the church who I knew had experience with it. I had never personally met her, but she was willing to take the time to meet with me, and it was so helpful. So, okay, that's my little soapbox, and I'll stop and I'll pray. Okay. Dear Lord, I just thank you so much for all of these ladies tonight, all of them who are here, but especially for Lori and Connie and Sandy and Nikki, Lord, and just the time that they took to prepare for tonight, to answer our questions, and just for all the years of preparation that they've had through raising their own children, and just how they're so willing to share the wisdom that they were given. Thank you for just the way that you've encouraged each one of us tonight through their testimony, Lord, and I just pray that you'd help us to take at least one thing to go and bless our family with, Lord, and I just pray that you'd give each one of us strength and wisdom as we walk out those doors to those kids and to our husbands, and just give us the strength to love them well. And we pray these things in your name.